Hello, everyone, and welcome to another fresh episode of Reels to the Rhythms. I am Michaela.
And I'm Carrie Ann.
Hello. Today, we are going to be talking about a movie, and
Yes.
it hails from our sister country,
Neighbor
Canada.
to the north,
Ne-
not sister country,
Neighbor,
neighbor
yeah,
to the north.
yeah, neighbor to the north, Canada. And I honestly, I've watched this a while ago, so Carrie had to catch up on watch it. I'm gonna
Yeah.
rewatch it because I had watched it a long time ago. But it's Brother. So Brother is on Netflix. It is available on Netflix, but it is a Jamaican-Canadian story. So we've talked about the UK Jamaican story. Now we got up so, as Carrie just said, to a Canadian Jamaican story. And so Brother was actually released in 2022. It is a Canadian drama written and produced and directed by Clement Virgo. And it is a adaptation of the book of the same name, which was written by David Shariandi. I hope I said my name right. Come in, never read the book. But it is about two brothers who are based in Scarborough, which is an area into
It's
what?
not Scarborough. We will say
Scarborough.
it's Scarborough.
Scarborough. Scarborough.
Scarborough. Yeah.
Scarborough. Thank you. Scarborough. Like
Scarborough.
bruh, bruh,
Yeah,
bruh,
Scarborough.
bruh.
We say borough because Brooklyn, we said the
Yes,
borough of Brooklyn.
borough. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
but them
But
not say borough.
me are not Canadian, so me can't
Okay.
say it the way me or me want to say it,
Okay.
But anyway, it's a section in Toronto, Canada, where have the people them.
Yeah.
And it is at the time I think they're both in high school. So one is like a senior, and I think so one brother, his name is Francis, played by Aaron Pierre, and the other brother, Michael, is played by Lamar Johnson. So it's about their relationship. They are children of immigrant parents. We know the mom is Jamaican. I'm not sure if the father is Jamaican. The father's not in the picture. He is of Caribbean descent. We don't know the backstory of how they met.
I think it alludes to them be him being Jamaican, but
Jamaican,
again,
yes,
this we'll get more into this, but I think the story has more to do with the impact of the
yes,
father being missing from their lives.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, and the toll it took on their mother. So it's a drama like through
Yeah.
and through, and it's something that we haven't seen, I think, which I really enjoyed watching. It's a serious drama about the two brothers and their perspectives, but I love the cinematography on it and how it's just shot really well. It's a little bit dark, and you can tell the different scenes of when they go back. So spoiler alert, the older brother Francis dies, and you can tell in the scenes where the brother where Francis is not in, it's much darker than the scenes where he is actually in. And so that distinct contrast between Francis being present and him not is also visually part of the movie. So I thought it was really well written, well acted. I think the actors did a really, really good job. That was the first thing that I noticed. I noticed it the first time, and I even noticed it even more the second time that I watched it. But I really enjoyed the storyline. I liked how they developed the characters, and they really did leave a lot to the imagination. So what did you think, Carrie Ann?
Yeah. So let's back up. You
Back
call the
up,
name
back up, back up.
you call the name of one of the main characters, and since then, Francis's character, which is played by Pierre, is the lead in Rebel Ridge, which is on Netflix, right? And he's of some Caribbean background, maybe born in the UK, then moved to Canada, and some Jamaica and Curacao mix up somewhere in there. Um, and I think the mom also is of Caribbean heritage. To your point, like the movie started and we know immediately, I know Francis is larger than life. And you get that sense in the way his brother looked up to him, especially as kids, even as teenage boys, the way Francis just walked through the school and people know who he is. There are, gangs and people are war and whatever. And he just is like Switzerland. Like he has this gravitas about him, right? That people just like. I think even one point the girl what him like looked like he did like the brother. I was like, girl, no, don't do it.
I thought she was good. Yo, the weird, or she did not like, oh, hi, Francis.
That's it. I was just like,
we think Aisha did not go get tech wet by his brother, but I know, but Francis thinks so highly of Michael and he's so protective of him that he wouldn't do that. But he knows that if she had violated and tried to like talk him up, it would have been a wrap for her. Like,
yeah.
and it would have been a bigger problem. So I'm glad he didn't make a move on Aisha.
So I mean, and at some point I realized, okay, something is going on with Francis. And at one point, may I guess, Francis drop off at the light tower? Like, what happened? Like,
I was waiting for that the entire show. I'm like, yo, the man must have just dropped off at it. Like, so even like, what do you think the symbolism of them climbing that tower?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, to me, it was just like, it's really about escaping the everyday life that they had. And for me, it was good to hear the familiar communities in the series, and knowing how to make those visual references. But for me, I appreciated hearing the Canadian Caribbean experience and seeing how it played out, how it wasn't that different. I mean, we know because, my husband's aunt, my great grandmother, they all, similar stories, but seeing it played out, working really hard to make ends meet, culturally, the barbershop, places of community where you go buy food, like all of those things, and violence and discrimination also playing out in similar ways, right? I think it was important for us to see that. Even though we know it, it was important to see how that is played out in a place where it's not as urban. It's not suburban. I don't know how you would describe Scarborough, because it's not like Brooklyn, but it's also has a suburban-y type feel if you're comparing like the town or the city to like American cities, right? So just like seeing how that plays out, in a different context.
I like that you said that, and maybe I did think too that he was gonna just fall off of that. And honestly, I thought it was gonna be the younger brother, not the older brother. I love how they interweave that story, Michael's story, and Francis's story, but the story is really from Michael's perspective, if you
Yeah.
will.
Mhm.
What you learn about Francis, you learn through the eyes of Michael distinctively,
Mhm.
right? So there are a lot of things that we don't understand about Francis and you don't get the answers to, but there is a lot of thoughts. And you kind of alluded to it in the beginning when you shared that his dad is their father isn't present. However, their lack of presence forced Francis to kind of feel like this father brother to Michael. And he was that, to be completely transparent, because, you saw the scenes where, the mom had to go to work at night and she locked the door. She made sure they had dinner, cut off the TV certain time. And but you also saw the vulnerability of Francis, he from a younger age. So he was always toying with that, being himself and almost replacing his father. And I think when they went to go look for their father, that's what he was kind of yearning for. He was yearning for the release of that responsibility, because it felt like he never really got to be his own self, if you will.
I mean, I think what Francis and Michael showed, and Nick, my husband, called it out, is the burden of being the oldest, right? And the level of responsibility that you get. And I can't speak for any other, but I'm sure it exists in other cultures. The burden and responsibility that you bear when you're the oldest are, and they're younger kids to take care of. Like, I know what that's like. And also, so the scene was, I'll tell you the scene and how, my husband called it out and how I related to that. So there was a scene where Francis, they pour out the drinks, they mix the drinks, them set the table for dinner, set the knife, everything set down, and they sat at the table. And like 1 minute, the mother opened the door and walked in. And my husband was like, "You see that? You see how they know her schedule?" I felt that, right? Because we know the parent schedule to the point that you have to make sure that everything is in order. So the minute they step through the door, you're almost like catering to them, or you have to make sure that everything in the house pick and span. Them not supposed to look left and see something for do, or look right and see something. You understand me? I say, like, they're wait, me on the camera me look the other way. But anyway, I digress. But the level of, knowing her routine and
And the fact that Michael knew, I'm not Francis knew that, but Michael didn't. Because remember the scene when cover up the window of the file, and she come in and she said, "Me look like somebody who would have file on the window for the other people them go." Yo, that was probably like the funniest moment of the whole show. Poor Michael is he hasn't had the burden of needing to know mom's every move. But now that Francis has moved out and there's no food, he's not doing much, and all of a sudden, like, them now have curtain, and so him take it upon himself and can take the woman good file and pierce it over bright window, and my lady come over and say, "Me look like me's a woman when would I put a file in my window?" So I don't know why I found that, and even in that moment, it was funny. But he was legitimately like, why is she this upset over, like, he just did not have an understanding, and he could not understand why she would react that way. But that is something that Michael, if he was there, I mean, Francis, if Francis was there, he would not, that wouldn't have even happened. Like, and so Michael had to almost step into this role, especially as Francis passed. And even since, he almost feels like he's not going to be as good at it as his brother
Francis.
And yeah, and the fact that mom is now sick, which she was showing signs of that early, and now he has this new burden.
Was she showing signs of that early, or was she showing, I think it's a direct relation to Francis. That's what triggered it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Francis didn't die at that time. He had just left, and it was such a void for her that's why it was an onset. So the scene with the foil, Francis hadn't died yet. He just wasn't in the house. And so when she came home and she saw that, and then automatically she switched, and she's like, "Do you smell the dill?" And meanwhile, she just threw the jar of pickles, and she like doesn't remember that she threw the jar. And Michael is bleeding, and he's like, "It's mango." He ain't have no mango. And I think that was like the early onset of her just not being 100% there. And to be honest, maybe she's been operating in this space, and Francis leaving was a trigger, and then him dying just like
Yeah.
compounded it.
All right. There was something else. Um, how much spoiler we want to give? I think the
We have to get
triggers.
all of them is a review show. We have to tell the people
No,
them the story, make them go back and watch.
I think Francis in school being frustrated. So I think again the burden of being the oldest, but Francis also having high ambition and expectation of himself, being in school, and when he was like, all they do is funnel them through shop class, right? And we hear him say it, but it's not until we visually see the shop class of all the black kids in the class, right? And he's being criticized because he didn't make a salt and pepper shaker, and the guidance counselor is basically suggesting that this is the only job that he can have, and
Yeah.
being very frustrated, and that's what triggers his mom, because in his mom's mind is like, yo, just go to school, finish, like, what Caribbean and maybe any immigrant parent would say. And
Mm-hmm.
he's very frustrated because he has very high expectations, maybe high to the point that it's a derailer to the scene that ultimately happened when they went and did the demo for the DJ. Yes, that's a very frustrating thing, but he had put all the eggs and hopes and ambition in that basket, that it
Yeah.
was just like he broke. He
Yeah,
broke.
it was his one dreamy opportunity thing, and he's not used to being a dreamer, at least acting it out in any way. Francis, we've seen, has always been the responsible one,
Mhm.
and so he feels like he hasn't been allowed to dream, and so he probably believes it's a right of pat. Like he has the right to dream. Like, why can't I? I'm still very young. I should be able to make this happen. And when he is met with that adversity, like you said, he broke, and then in the shop, it was just the nail on the coffin to have the cops come in and raid them for the upteenth time. They're like, it settles into him like, shit, maybe I'm never gonna be anything, so why even put in the effort. Yeah, that was definitely tough to watch, and it just was just like, damn.
I think also with the other things that comes up, Aisha's dad, um, just, and even Aisha going where she go and come back. And um a theme that I've heard before in Carry On Friends, you know, they don't know a lot about their parents before they were in Canada. They heard, but they never really experienced it. And I'm not sure when the timing of this is, but it goes back to what Tristan was saying in that episode. Like, they didn't get to go back to Jamaica a lot, right? Aisha clearly didn't go to Jamaica, so she went on her own little, pilgrimage to Jamaica to learn where her father came from. And so that is one thing that, you have a privilege, and unlike Tristan, you go back more often. I have that
Mhm.
privilege because I was born there. So it made me realize that we cannot discount or underestimate the lack of experience or what happens to someone who's born to people of Caribbean heritage, but they don't get to go back home, see where their parent, grandparent comes from, or experience it in a way outside of the product of tourism,
Mhm.
because that is not the same as reconnecting with your family. And that is difficult, compounded if the family isn't there, or the father, whoever, whether it's your mother, your grandfather, they no longer have those ties back home. So it's very hard to make those connections. And I can see how, Francis and Michael might have a difficult time because it was just them and their mother. There was no grandmother, there was no uncle, there was none of that for them.
There weren't even
Um,
any neighbors, really and truly, which
yeah.
is, like she literally just went to work, kept to herself, and
As a
that's a different
kid,
story.
it didn't seem like there were any neighbors, but as they got older, it
Yeah,
felt like Michael made a concerted effort to
yeah,
interact with the kids because he fixed the little girl bicycle, the little girl who ended up getting shot with a stray bullet.
yeah,
Like they're aware of the other kids, but for them growing up, it just feels like it was just them in the house. It was just
yeah,
Michael and Francis.
yeah.
And that is very hard.
And I think that kind of goes back to that mentality of like what's in the house stays in the house, and
Yeah.
don't be talking about business out on the road. And so they know, and they're in proximity with one another. But and even when Aisha came back and she was talking about her dad, and their mom was kind of like reflecting, like she heard about the Aisha said, I know that you and my dad are from the same village in Jamaica. And she's just like, tell me more about Kampala. Like she skirted talking about her past. And so there was something there that she clearly wants to forget. And it's something that I think Michael was actually like Michael wasn't pushing the conversation, but he wanted to hear what she was gonna say.
I don't know if that I didn't read it that way. I
Mm,
I felt like she overlooked it because she was more interested in Kampala, and I was like, what happened there? Was their father supposed to be in Kampala? Was he there? And did he not come back, or did he go, like something in her life around that? Maybe it was a dream of hers to go there or something. And that's why I was trying to get a good look in the passport when Francis picked up his mother's passport and put it in the wallet, cuz I was like, was she there? Was she supposed to go there? Was someone there? Like it wasn't clear. So I didn't think it
mhm.
was because she was avoiding. I didn't interpret it that way. That could very well be a way, but
Yeah,
I also felt like maybe it was someplace she was supposed to go, someplace she's been, but she has some connection to that place, whether she, like I said, she was supposed to go or whatever. So
yeah. Well, I would I the and the reason I made that assumption is because Kampala's in Africa.
yeah.
And so it's very rare for in that time frame to be not that it didn't happen. But to dream and thinking about that like as a dreamy place didn't really.
Yeah, but also at the time it's very Afrocentric. I didn't think it
Yeah,
necessarily
yeah, yeah.
odd. It's
I
very
think it's
Af
interesting that we watched the same scene and we're thinking different thoughts.
y-
And again, it let the movie really left a lot up to
yeah.
interpretation, which in some cases I think that you get annoyed by, but in some like in this case, I thought it was beautiful the way that
Mhm.
they left a lot of things unsaid. But
Yeah.
how did you feel about that?
No, I think it's and I think that's the beauty of it, right? Like there there are things that we see it very differently, just very different experiences. You also know somebody who might have a similar experience, so I'm using that as a lens to guide me through this narrative of what's
Hmm.
potentially happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it was good, because then you're not necessarily forcing people to a particular thought. You're
Hmm.
looking at, yes, we all have a similar immigrant experience. You pick up, leave one place, come to another place. But how we all experience the place or living in the place will vary. And so leaving room between the lines to kind of fill in more detail is going to be nuanced and unique based on the lens that you experience immigration, or whether you did experience it directly or indirectly because you're a second or third generation. And I think that's why you and I see it very differently,
Yeah.
um because we never got into her life before.
Yeah.
And to me it felt like her and the father in the scene where they were all dancing, they looked like they did fine. They were happy some way. It felt like maybe they were students, aspiring students, right? Which is one of the ways that I know people particularly go to Canada at the time, right? They were aspiring students and they had dreams of maybe, this is me, thinking, oh, maybe they went to Canada to get some more education and they decide that okay, they probably had an opportunity to go on a mission or something. Like that's just how I saw it, given that she's a nurse, right?
Hmm.
And um the very specialized aspect of being a nurse. I And that's how I looked at it, because I know a lot of people who went that route and had many opportunities because they're nurses. So if we look at the
Yeah.
immigration story, in the UK, you want teacher, you want nurse, right? And because of
Hmm.
those professions, they are able to have more. And did she not have more because she had the kids?
Yeah.
And so, just stuff like that.
Again, the direction of the film was so open ended, right? Like he clearly had a intimate relationship with his friend Jelly, um, but it didn't distinctly talk about what that relationship was like. So Francis, and his friend Jelly, who was a DJ, they clearly had an intimate relationship, and I do think everyone around them knew how close they were, but they weren't like title driven, or like it doesn't
Nor
even
were
allude
they
to,
affectionate in
nor were
public.
they
Yeah,
yes, they weren't affectionate in public. It also doesn't clearly state whether Francis was gay or bisexual.
sure. Yeah.
So I think that it
We're
leaves a lot
all
for interpretation. Yeah,
Interpretation, right? And we're only making this inference from a scene where Francis is clearly upset. I think it was after the visit from the father,
with the father.
and
Yeah.
Jelly hugs him,
Yes.
but not a broski hug, like tap
Yeah.
and tap back. It's a hug. Um,
Yeah. It's a
console,
consoling,
soling,
intimate.
intimate, consoling hug.
Yeah.
So this is the inference, this is where we're making that. And
But also he's very protective, more so of him,
of
of Jelly, especially when the police do the raid. He gets
they said, don't
irate
touch
and he's
him.
like,
Yeah.
"Don't touch him," and it was like twice, right? So he's very protective of Jelly, the same way that he was protective of his brother. But in those instances where his brother and Jelly were in the same scene, he chose to protect Jelly
Jelly.
versus his brother. So I
Hmm.
think that those are the kind of nuanced scenes that we do see. We also see Michael kind of coming into his own as a man, and we see him grow in his relationship with Aisha. We know that they part ways, and then they come together in Aisha's father's death. That's kind of what brings her back to the community and kind of unravels this kind of story. I think it's also interesting the scene with the party at the house and how like that left a lot for interpretation too. But I think that was just like such a dynamic scene, um, between Jelly, the mom, Aisha, and Michael, and even how Michael came back to apologize. Like they weren't upset with Michael; they were still like very.
Yeah, because you know why? Because I think we saw, like, after the whole raid and whatever, and Francis did, everybody splurt. Everybody
Yeah,
went. And so Michael probably carried feelings like, yo, nobody was there to get justice for Francis, really.
yeah,
And we saw how Michael pushed Aisha away. So Aisha go about her business and travel the world. And maybe a little bit of resentment Michael
yeah.
is carrying because she did that. Because you saw the same scene where Emma sweep the same place in this,
And
working
the
in the
same
same
as
place where
his
Francis
brother.
was
Yes,
working.
yes,
So you
yes,
you have that. Um and Michael not really being able to grieve because he's accommodating his mom's grief.
yeah,
And I also feel like, in a minor way, his mom almost forgetting that she has another child because she's so consumed with Francis's death.
yeah,
Even when he was trying to console her, like at some point in the funeral, like she flash him off or some, you know.
yeah, yeah.
So a lot of complex emotions, in there. Um, and I think it couldn't be a proper Caribbean themed show if you didn't have parents with layered and complex emotions, but not realizing that there's just we there are there are a lot box of
Hmm.
things, and
Yeah,
we're only seeing the symptoms of what's
yeah.
in that locked box of emotions and experiences. And so it's easy
Ooh,
for us
me like that. Yeah.
to say, well, the mother wicked, but they're
No, I
dealing
didn't
with
even think
things.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't even think that. Again, for me, it was really just a beautifully complex story, one that we haven't seen. So I highly recommend everyone
Yeah.
watch. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely a good watch.
Yeah, definitely a good watch. It took me a long time to watch it because I needed to get in the headspace of,
Yeah,
watching it, because from the preview I knew it was a drama and there was a level of somberness to it, at least. I'm
yeah.
like, oh, something not gonna happen. So you kind of have to get in that headspace. And I mean, as an aside, that's how I choose what to watch. What am I in the mood for? Do I want to laugh? Do I want action? Something like that. So yeah, I definitely recommend Brother. I hear the director come from Mobi, Virgo, Mr.
Mm,
Virgo. Yep, I wouldn't know him. I'm just saying, big up, you know.
big up, Bobby. Yeah. All right. So, from a ratings standpoint, we have to go through our new rating system for Brother. So, from an accent standpoint, 1 to 5, what would you give it?
Um, the mother accent was pretty good. Um, the other accents, again, being the mix up with the Canadian and stuff, I think it was fine. I'll give it like a 4. If I consider the mother, Francis, and the little brother, their accents and where they all kind of balance out, I'd give it a 4.
Yes, I agree. I'd give it a 4 too. I think the mom, at times she had slightly off, but I think the two, like Francis, the older brother, was consistent. Like I think I have a cousin that is from Toronto, and to me, like that's how he speaks, and like when I hear him, that's who I hear. And it's definitely this mix of Canadian slang, Caribbean, Jamaican slang in it. Like it felt very authentic. And then because the younger brother really didn't he didn't really have an accent at all, so it was kind of just him speaking pretty plain English, but you could hear like tonalities. It kind of reminds me of like my oldest daughter,
Mhm.
like how she kind of speaks in that way. Like you could tell there's something there, but it's not as overwhelmingly present as it is with Francis. So 4, yes. All right, on to the next character. Depth. What would you give it?
Man, um, I think I'll give it a 4. I wouldn't even say 4.5, like a high 4. Boy, this tough. I wanted to know a little bit about the father, but like I said, the father not being known allows us to color in and finish the story. So the characters were as strong as they were going to get. So I'll just give it a 4.
I think it's a 5. It's a 5 for me. I really, really liked what they kept versus what they left out.
Hmm.
And I think it left this beauty in the complexity of each person. Of course, we all wanted to know more, but I thought that it left so much to the imagination, but not really, because I also think that it's indicative of the time and how a lot of people kind of grew up in that same manner. Like there's so much that was unsaid that
Yeah.
is usually just goes unsaid,
Yeah.
until you just either never have the opportunity to work it out or identify it, or you do, and it's usually later in life. So I think that the character development was spot on. So it's a 5 for me. Okay, storyline.
Storyline is a 5,
Yeah,
solidly,
solid 5.
because
Yes.
it was it was just believable. It just like I'll never forget what my husband said. He was like, "Yo, those kids knew their mom. They time it perfectly. They sit down at the table, wait till she must come through the door. Like it just connected in a way that made sense. You just it was a 5. Storyline 5.
5 for me too. Me not even got me now got itch. 5. Yes,
5.
5, 5. All right. Music and sound. Music and sound.
Um for what they were trying to do, I think it was a 4. I mean, they did do the dance, in the barber shop, which at first when they said they were going to, what's the name of the friend place? I thought it was like a restaurant or club. I don't remember, but
Yeah,
it makes
yeah.
sense. It's a barber shop,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Because that's where everybody hang out. So I give it a 4, because for when they did play music, it was on point, and I guess could they have done more music? I don't know. I'd have to go back and think through. But for what they did, the selections were on point.
Yeah. 4 for me too. I like how they really intertwine the time period of the music, which
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was it mirrored a lot of what was happening in the 90s from a hip hop perspective, mixing with dance hall and having both in both cultures. Like that really happened in New York too. So it was nice to see. Again, I don't think music was the key
Key.
component, but it did really play a huge part. And I loved how it kind of brought the mom out of her trance a bit, having company and dancing. And it wasn't like anything in particular, it just set the mood really nicely. The reason why I gave it a 4, I think where it fell flat for me was in the DJ competition.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
exactly what I
yeah.
was gonna say. I was like, why did they go
Them,
with
yeah,
this? Why
yeah,
them never
yeah,
go? That's exactly
yeah.
why. I didn't want to even, I was just like, but then they're in America, and maybe the DJ, the competition was
No,
specifically
I
to
thought
think
he was gonna bring it with some
some,
fire, some
yeah.
heat, like the way that he was rocking in the barbershop and
I
the
was like,
people was rocking, like it wasn't strong enough, and maybe that was the point. Like that may have been the point. Also like they
yeah,
were nervous. The selections, it was their first time, so you know what I mean. Like they didn't really know what to expect, and so it was like in the barbershop, it was like this raw talent that he had that he showcased. And in the competition, it's like he scaled it back,
way
right?
back. It was
Way
just
back.
watered
Yeah,
down.
it was so watered down. And that to me was what like and it, like again, it was a weaker selection, but that might have been the point of what they chose from a story direction perspective. So that's why I gave it a 4.
Yeah. Mm.
All right, visual authenticity.
Yeah, me watch this
5.
right after me just come back from Toronto and ping pong all over. So yeah, it get a 5.
Yeah, yeah, definitely a 5 for me as well. And I think it was just so beautifully shot too. The way I spoke about it earlier already. So I'm not gonna belabor
Go
it,
back,
but like
yeah,
I love the way that it was shot. So it's a 5 for me.
yeah.
All right, so
And
this
so
is
overall,
exciting.
we gave
Yes.
it a 4.5. All our scores average out.
Hey,
As you dear me to type in the
I
numbers.
got me. I said it quick with the maths.
Listen, no, I'm an
Who
Excel
said
spreadsheet. I
who
calculate.
said you not good for maths?
Eh, eh. Who say me not have system set up for plug in? Ping,
Yes.
ping, ping. That's what we do. But I'm really excited. I love that we have these categories, and it gives depth to the conversation. And I mean, even the visual aspect, you know, this idea of cinematography is something that we don't talk about a lot, but that is such a critical role. And I remember I started paying attention to cinematography with two series years ago. It was Insecure and Queen Sugar, because
Ooh, Queen
they
Sugar is beautiful.
they shot like black people never look
Mhm.
so pretty on
Ralph
TV.
Angel.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Well, now gonna send me down one next part.
But it was just so good. And I think
Yeah.
calling that out as an important element of shooting projects or, around people of color, I think it's good,
Hmm.
to really show for the beauty and the emotion and the texture to come out in the story. So I'm excited.
Yeah.
Are we this reels to the
Yes.
rhythms? Purr, 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 purr. All right. Until the next episode, and we have some fun ones coming up. I'm excited.
Yes. Yes. All right.
All right.
Later.
Later.